The sensor board on the Conquered patrol ship Velmarin had not made an error. In 11 years of service, operator Dren Saveth knew this because he had run the diagnostics himself every month without fail. He trusted the board, the way he trusted gravity. So when it screamed at him, he listened. Gate 7 was a quiet posting. Ships passed through on schedule, cargo, haulers, diplomatic transports, the occasional Conquered survey vessel running. Late on its return, Dren had been stationed here for 3 years, and the most exciting thing that had ever happened was a freighter clipping a buoy and spinning slowly into the lane marker. He had watched it for 20 minutes. That was the highlight. Then the FTL wake opened. It was not unusual in shape. Ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through Gate 7 dozens of times each shift, the energy signature bloomed. The way it always did, the distortion folded back, and a vessel appeared in real space. But the sensor board did not give him a class rating. It gave him a question mark. Dren stared at it. He tapped the screen. He ran the auto-identification sweep. Twice, the ship in front of him was real. He could see it on the visual feed. Long and dark, sitting still in the transit lane with its running lights on. And its weapons cold. It was not trying to hide. It was not doing anything aggressive. It was simply sitting there, broadcasting its identity signal on the open Conquered frequency, waiting. The identity signal read, UEHV Ironhold, Earth Unified Fleet, Diplomatic. Transit to Vel Sarath, crew of 400, requesting lane clearance. Dren pulled up the threat assessment tool. It was the same tool used by every Conquered military vessel, calibrated to handle everything from a personal shuttle to Class 7 heavy cruiser, the largest category allowed under Conquered treaty law. The tool returned a single line of red text. EXCDS maximum defined PARAMETRS. Classification unavailable. He read it 3 times, then he called his commander. Commander Heddas arrived on the bridge still pulling on his jacket. He looked at the screen. He looked at the ironhold on the visual feed. He looked back at the screen. He said nothing for a long moment. Hail them, he said. Dren opened the channel. The voice that answered was calm and unhurried, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who had made this call before and expected the reaction. They were getting a human woman, low tone, clear. This is Commander Dara Osei of the UEHV Ironhold. We are on an authorized diplomatic transit to the Conquered capital on behalf of the Earth Unified Government. We are broadcasting our full manifest, and we have no hostile intent. We are requesting escort clearance. Heddas leaned forward. Commander Osei, our instruments are having difficulty classifying your vessel. I understand, Osei said. That is a known issue. We are happy to assist with any questions during transit. Heddas straightened. A known issue, as if the fact that his threat computer had broken trying to read her ship was something she had planned for in advance. He looked at Dren. Dren looked back with the expression of someone who very much wanted to be somewhere else. The Velmarin was a patrol vessel. It was fast and well-armed for its size. A Class 4 interceptor with a crew of 60 and enough firepower to handle most border incidents. Heddas had commanded it for 4 years and had never once felt small inside it. He felt small now. The ironhold was not visually enormous. It was roughly the size of a Class 6 heavy cruiser, the kind of ship that a major Conquered member might field as its flagship, but the armor on its hull was wrong, not in appearance, in density. Even at visual distance, the light reflected off it differently. Layered, heavy in a way that had no equivalent in Heddas's experience. The weapon mounts were recessed, flush with the hull, but there were too many of them arranged in overlapping fields of fire that left no blind angle. The reactor output reading had not stopped climbing since the ship arrived. It was sitting at idle, and it was already generating more energy than the Velmarin could produce at full combat power. Hedda's made his decision. We will escort you to Vel-Sarath, Commander. Please maintain current speed and heading. Appreciated, Osai said. We will follow your lead. Hedda's closed the channel. He turned to his communications officer. Get me. Fleet Command, Priority 1, wake whoever you have to wake. He turned back to the visual feed and watched the Ironhold sitting quiet in. The transit lane, lights on, weapons cold, perfectly patient. The thing that stayed with him was not the weapons, it was not the armor or the reactor readings, or the fact that his entire threat classification system had simply given up when confronted with this ship. It was the phrase she had used, a known issue. She had said it the way someone says the weather is cold, prepared, practiced, as if humanity had sent this ship knowing exactly what reaction it would get, and had decided to come anyway. Hedda's had spent his career learning to read threats. He was good at it. He could not read this one, and that, more than any number on any screen, was what made his hands go still against the console. The Velmarin fell into formation alongside the Ironhold, two ships moving through Gate 7 toward the capital, one of them a mountain, the other shadow at its side. Across the fleet network, the alert was already moving. By the time crossed the outer marker, 12 more conquered vessels had changed course. The galaxy had noticed. The war chamber on Vel-Sarath was built to hold 30. There were 54 people in it. Admiral Sav Ren stood at the front of the room and watched his analysts work through the data pulled from Gate 7's sensor logs. He had read the initial report on his way in. He had read it twice more since sitting down. It did not improve with repetition. The lead analyst, a young Velthari named Cord, was putting numbers on the main display. She was doing it without commentary, which was the professional way to handle a room full of senior officers who were already struggling to maintain composure. First number, armor density rating. The Ironhold's outer hull registered at a composite density 40% higher than any known military-grade material. In Conquered records, not 40% higher than average, 40% higher than the best thing the Conquered had ever built. Second number, reactor output at idle. The Ironhold was currently traveling at low transit speed, weapons cold, shields passive. At idle, its reactor output exceeded the full combat output of a Conquered Class 6 flagship. Third number, weapon mount count, 41 confirmed hard points, a Class 7 heavy cruiser carried 18. Cord put the cursor on the third number and left it there for a moment. Then she moved on. Fourth finding, point defense saturation, based on mount placement and firing. Arc analysis, the Ironhold had no blind angle. There was no approach vector from which an incoming weapon would not be met by at least two independent defense systems. Fifth finding, the one that made the room go quiet. Hull stress patterns, an engine, where analysis indicated the Ironhold was not a prototype, it was not new. The wear signatures on the hull plating were consistent with a vessel that had been in active service for a minimum of 4 years. This ship had been operational and working for 4 years without the Conquered knowing it existed. And hull residue traces from the docking clamps suggested it had been maintained in a facility alongside other vessels of similar mass. Cord said it plainly. Based on the evidence, the Ironhold is not a unique vessel, it is one of a class. The room did not explode. It went the other way. It got very quiet, the kind of quiet where everyone is doing the same calculation in their head and no One wants to say the answer out loud first. Admiral Wren said it. You are telling me humanity has been building a war. Fleet. Core did not flinch. I am telling you the physical evidence is consistent. With that interpretation, I cannot confirm the number of vessels. Estimate. She hesitated, based on facility size inferred from residue traces and standard construction timelines for a vessel of this class, between 6 and 20. Someone in the back of the room made a sound, not a word, just a sound. Wren stood still. He had been in uniform for 31 years. He had handled border conflicts, treaty breakdowns, 2 minor wars between member species that the conquered had mediated before they became major ones. He was not a man who startled easily. He was startled now. A junior analyst named Pell raised her hand. She was 2 years out of the academy, sir. If this is accurate, did humanity just reveal a secret war fleet by sending one ship to the capital? They sent it diplomatically, someone said. Full manifest broadcast. Escort request. They followed procedure. They followed procedure in a ship that our threat systems cannot classify. Another voice said, that is not the same thing. Wren held up a hand and the room went quiet again. He looked at the numbers on the board. He thought about what kind of government builds something like this and then sends it to the capital with its weapons cold and its manifest open. Not a government preparing to attack. An attack did not announce itself in request escort clearance. But not a government that felt it needed permission, either. Meanwhile, the Ironhold moved through conquered space at steady transit speed, surrounded by 17 escort vessels that would have been impressive against anything else in the galaxy. Commander Os sat in her command chair and watched the formation on the tactical display. Her helmsman, Bryce Acaffer, kept his course exactly as instructed. He was 29 years old and had the steadiest hands Osai had ever seen on a navigator. Ambassador Lyra Des came and stood beside Osai's chair. They are scared, Osai said. Yes, Des said. Good, Osai said. Scared means they will listen. Bryce Acaffer said nothing. He watched the stars ahead, the long dark between here and the capital, and kept flying. In the war chamber, Admiral Wren made his decision. He authorized a formal intercept formation, 40 vessels, the largest peacetime assembly in half a century. The Ironhold would be stopped before it reached Vel Soreth. Humanity had 6 hours to explain itself. 40 ships was a statement. Wren had meant it to be. The Ironhold came out of the last transit relay and found them waiting. 40 conquered vessels, arranged in a half-sphere formation across the approach lane, every weapon system active, every shield at full. It was the kind of display that had ended border disputes without a single shot fired, because no rational government looked at 40 warships and decided to push forward. Osai looked at the formation on her display for about 3 seconds. Maintain course and speed, she said. Bryce Acaffer did not blink. Yes, Commander. The Ironhold kept moving, not fast, not aggressive, just steady the way it had been moving since Gate 7. The 40-ship wall opened a narrow lane, because stopping a vessel that had declared diplomatic transit without firing on it was a war crime, and Wren was angry, but he was not that kind of angry. The channel opened. Wren's voice came through, clipped and controlled. Commander Osai, you are ordered to hold position and submit to a formal review under Concord Treaty Article 9. Your vessel exceeds all defined parameters of the treaty's military restrictions. You will explain this. Osai said, I agree to a full briefing, Admiral, on the open diplomatic channel. A pause. He had not expected that. The open channel is monitored by every conquered member. Yes, she said, I know. Another pause longer, then proceed. Osai stood. She did not use notes. 61 years ago, she said, 3 human colony worlds in the galactic fringe were attacked, not raided, not threatened, attacked, coordinated. Strikes high yield against civilian settlements. The attacking force did not communicate. It did not make demands. It appeared, hit 4 targets and withdrew back beyond the galactic rim. 400,000 humans died in 11 hours. The open channel was silent. Every conquered vessel in range was listening. Earth filed a full incident report with the conquered Security Council within 30 days. We included every sensor record we had. We asked for a joint investigation. We asked for answers. She stopped for one breath. Conquered Security Council classified the incident as a border disturbance. The report was sealed. No investigation was opened. No answers were given. She let that sit. We called it the Voakai incursion because the first strike hit a world called Voakai. We never found out what hit us. We never found out where it came from or why. What we did find over 20 years of our own research was this: the attack patterns were not random. They were probing, testing response times, defense capabilities, evacuation speeds. Whatever came out of the rim that day was not there to destroy us. It was there to study us, to see if we were worth coming back for. On the 40 conquered ships, no one was moving. Earth made a decision, Osai said, if no one else was going to prepare for what might come back out of that dark, we would. The iron hold is the result of 30 years of engineering, materials research and construction. It is not a weapon of aggression. Every system on this ship is built around a single threat profile, a non-communicating, high-aggression entity from beyond the rim with unknown technology and apparent strategic patience. She looked at the display, at the 40 ships surrounding her. We did not build the iron hold to threaten you. We built it because we intend to be the thing standing between you and what is out there. We came here today because humanity is tired of carrying this alone, and we believe it is time the conquered knew the truth. She sat down. The open channel stayed silent for a long time. On the conquered capital, in a private office far from the war chamber, Counselor Oreth Vel had been listening with a cup of tea going cold in his hand. He set it down carefully. He pulled up his terminal and searched for a file he had never had reason to look for before. The Voakai incident, 61 years ago, Security Council, sealed. It took him 4 minutes to get clearance to open it. He was a senior counselor. He had that authority. He had just never used it on this file, because he had never known this file existed. He started reading. His hands were trembling before he reached the 3rd page. Counselor Oreth Vel read the Voakai file for 2 hours. He read it the way you read something you cannot believe is real, slowly, going back over sentences, checking the dates, checking the names of the officials who signed the classification orders. The attack had been real. Every detail Osai had given on the open channel matched the sealed record exactly. 400,000 dead, 11 hours. An entity from beyond the rim that had come, measured and left. And then he found the part that Osai had not mentioned. Buried in the appendix, a secondary report filed by a conquered survey vessel that had followed the withdrawal trajectory 6 months after the attack. The survey team had gone as far as sensor range allowed, past the rim markers, into the deep dark. They had found residue, structural fragments from an unknown alloy, and one image caught at the edge of resolution, of something very large moving away from them at a speed that should not have been possible. The survey commander's conclusion, in plain language at the bottom of the report: this was not a border incident, this was reconnaissance. recommend, full council disclosure, and joint response planning. The recommendation had been marked REVIEWED, filed, no further action. Vel closed the file. He sat in the dark of his office for a while, then he went to find Admiral Wren. He found him in the war chamber, still running analysis on the iron holds. Capabilities. Vel walked in and the room read his expression and went quiet. Clear the room, Vel said. Wren looked at him. Whatever he saw made him not argue. He cleared the room. Vel put the file on the table between them. You need to read the appendix. Wren read it standing up. He did not sit down at any point. When he finished, he put the file down and stared at the wall. The survey team's recommendation, Vel said. No further action, do you know who signed that? Wren said a name. It was a Velthari name, someone who had been on the Security Council 6 decades ago, someone who had decided that disclosure would cause panic, that the political cost was too high, that the threat was distant enough to be someone else's problem. 61 years, Vel said. Humans lost 400,000 people. They came to us. We buried it, and they spent 3 decades building that ship in silence. Because they decided that if the conquered would not be ready, they would be. Wren had nothing to say. Vel sat down. He was an old man and he felt it right now. I am not angry at them, Sav. I am ashamed of us. Aboard the iron hold, Ambassador Lyra Des was working without stopping. The open channel briefing had done exactly what she intended. Every conquered member species was now contacting their embassy representatives, demanding information, pulling their own archives, asking questions the conquered bureaucracy was very uncomfortable answering. Des had a document ready, Earth's full 61 years of independent research on the Volkai entity, translated into 12 conquered languages. She released it simultaneously to every member ambassador. Not as an accusation, as an invitation. The cover letter said simply, we have been working on this alone for 61 years. We would rather not work alone anymore. Bryce Akefer sat at the helm and watched the conquered ships surrounding them. They were still in formation, but they had not moved to a firing solution in over 2 hours. He knew what that meant. He thought about his grandfather, who had grown up on Volkai's neighboring world and had watched the sky burn from a shelter and never fully slept in the dark again afterward. His grandfather had not lived to see the iron hold launch, but he had lived long enough to know it was being built. He had died knowing that someone was going to do something. Bryce kept his hands on the controls and kept flying. In the war chamber, Wren closed the file. He looked at Vel. The iron holds. Crew, do they know how close we came to firing on them? I imagine they assumed it was possible, Vel said. They came anyway. Yes, Vel said, they came anyway. Wren was quiet for a long time. Then he made a call, not to his fleet commanders, not to the Security Council. He opened a direct channel to the iron hold, and when Osai answered, he did not speak to her as an interrogator or a treaty enforcer. He spoke to her the way one soldier speaks to another when the politics have run out and all that is left is the truth. Commander, he said, tell me everything you know about what is beyond the rim. The conference room on the iron hold was not built to impress. It was functional, clean, lit by plain white panels, with a table that could seat 12 and chairs that were comfortable but not ceremonial. Os had chosen it deliberately. No symbols, no performance, just a room where people could talk. Admiral Wren came aboard with 6 senior officers and 2 conquered member representatives, including Counselor Vel. They came without weapons. Os met them at the docking collar with Des and Engineer Chief Winsato, who had joined the briefing remotely from Earth and was now present on a screen. At the end of the table. They sat down. There was water on the table, nothing else. Sato started without ceremony, because she did not know how to do ceremony. She was 63, had spent 40 years in materials engineering and starship design, and had the manner of someone who considered politeness reasonable goal, but small talk a personal offense. She walked them through the iron hold. The armor first. The alloy did not exist in conquered science because Earth had developed it specifically for this threat class, high-density composite, layered in alternating stress directions to distribute impact energy across the full hull rather than at the point of contact. It was heavy. It made the ship slower than a standard cruiser of the same size. That was acceptable, because the threat profile they were building for did not require speed. It required survival. Then the weapons, not designed for ship-to-ship combat against conquered vessels. The calibration was different. The yield curves were different. Everything was tuned for an unknown target with unknown shielding, which meant the weapons had been engineered to be adaptable mid-combat, with modular charge configurations that the crew could adjust based on what they were seeing in real time. Then the self-repair systems, redundant, layered, the iron hold could lose 30% of its hull integrity and still maintain full combat function. It could lose its primary reactor and run for 6 hours on secondary power at reduced but combat-capable output. One of Ren's officers leaned forward. Every system you have described is built around an opponent you have never actually fought. Correct, Sato said. How do you know it will work? Sato looked at him with the expression of someone who had been asked this before and had spent years making peace with the answer. We do not know for certain. We built the best thing we could with the information we had. We tested everything that could be tested. The rest we will learn when we have to. The room was quiet for a moment. Ren asked the question that had been sitting in front of him since Gate 7. Why did you not bring this to the conquered openly, decades ago, before you built anything? Osa answered. We did. We filed the Vaukai report. We requested a joint investigation. The conquered sealed our report and filed no further action. She said it without heat, just as fact. We decided that if the conquered would not prepare, we would prepare for both of us. One of the member representatives, a Drenathi named Soval, spoke carefully. You built a fleet of warships without informing the governing body of which you are a member. You understand how that looks. Yes, Des said. We do. We also understand how it looks that the governing body buried a report about 400,000 dead civilians and an unknown entity conducting reconnaissance on conquered space. She said it gently, but she said it completely. We are not here to assign blame. We are here because we think that window of preparation is closing, and we cannot do what comes next alone. Vel asked the question that had been sitting with him since he read the file. How many ships do you have? Osei met his eyes. Enough. He nodded slowly. He had not expected a number. He had expected exactly that answer. Then he asked the question that changed the temperature of the room. If the threat comes before the conquered is ready, before we have time to build and train and organize, what will you do? The room went still. Osei said, we will go first. She did not say it as a boast. She said it the way you state a fact that has already been decided. That was decided a long time ago by people who understood the cost and made the choice anyway. We will go first, she said again. We always have. No one spoke for a while. Ren looked at his hands on the table. He thought about the survey. Commander's report, filed 61 years ago, marked no further action. He thought about what it must have felt like to be Earth, to bring a wound to the table and be told it was not serious, and then to go home and quietly build something that said, "We will not be caught unprepared again." He looked at Osai. "I would like to formally request access to your research. All 61 years of it." He paused, "and I would like to ask on behalf of the conquered whether Earth would be willing to share the ironholds. Design. Not a demand, a request." Osai looked at Des. Des gave the smallest nod. "We will share everything," Osai said. 3 weeks passed. The conquered voted on the 19th day after the ironhold's arrival. The session ran for 11 hours, and the debate was the hardest the chamber had seen in a generation. Several members argued that humanity had violated treaty law regardless of intent and should face formal sanction. Several others argued that the conquered had forfeited its moral authority to sanction anyone the moment it sealed the Vaukai report. In the end, the vote was close, but it passed. The Vaukai incursion records were declassified in full. A joint investigation committee was formed, with Earth granted lead research status. Based on their 6 decades of existing work, every conquered member received full access to the data Earth had spent 30 years collecting in silence. A second motion passed, narrower after longer debate. The treaty limits on military vessel classification would be reviewed, with a new framework to be drafted that accounted for external threats rather than only regulating conflict between member species. It was the biggest shift in conquered law in 100 years. Oreth Vel did not celebrate. He went home and slept for 14 hours, which was more sleep than he had gotten in the past 3 weeks combined. He woke up still feeling the weight of that appendix sitting in his chest. The ironhold remained at Velsoreth, not as a detained vessel, not as a threat, but as the center of the most unusual military exchange program the galaxy had ever seen. Conquered engineers arrived with questions. Conquered officers came to observe the ship's operations. 3 member species quietly submitted expanded defense budget proposals to their home governments within a week of seeing Sato's full technical briefing. None of them said the word ironhold in those proposals. They did not have to. Commander Osai stood at the observation window of the docking bay and watched a group of Velthari engineers talking with Sato over a schematic of the armor layering system. Sato was correcting someone's assumption and not being particularly gentle about it, which meant things were going normally. Des came and stood beside her. "You did not want to scare them," Des said. "It was not quite a question." "I wanted them to understand," Osai said. "There is a difference. Right now, I am not sure they feel the difference." "They will," Osai said, "when they have read all the data, when they have looked at the rim scans themselves, when they stop being scared of the ironhold and start being scared of the right thing." She watched Sato wave a hand at someone's counterargument. "Then they will understand." Bryce Akafer was at the helm station even though the ship was docked. He was reviewing a new transit order that had arrived that morning. It was brief and official, and he had read it 4 times because he wanted to make sure he had it right. Full diplomatic clearance, all conquered space, no escort required, authorized to operate at the discretion of the commanding officer. It was the first time in conquered history that a human vessel had been given that designation. He pulled up the nav charts and began plotting a course, for no reason other than to have one ready, just the way he always did. In the conquered war chamber, Sav Ren sat alone long after his staff had gone home. The Vaukai files were spread across his table. He kept coming back to the survey team's image, the large shape at the edge of resolution, moving away at impossible speed. He thought about what Osei had said. "We will go first, we always have." He thought about what it must take to build a ship like the Ironhold, and then fly it calmly into the center of galactic governance and sit with weapons cold, while 40 warships surrounded you because you needed the people inside those warships to eventually be on your side, and you understood that the only way to get them there was to show them the truth and trust them to handle it. He thought that was either the bravest thing he had ever heard of or the most patient. He was not sure there was a real difference. He set down the files and began to write a proposal for a joint deprim. Survey fleet, Earth-designed vessels, conquered crew representation, a form. Mission to go to the edge of what was known and look at what was beyond it. With eyes that were finally open. For the first time in months, he was not thinking about treaties or politics or classification limits. He was thinking about the dark beyond the rim and who he wanted beside him when the time came. He thought he knew. Far from Velsoreth, at a conquered sensor post on the galactic fringe, monitoring officer named Bast was running her standard sweep. She had done it every shift for 2 years. Nothing ever came back unusual. The sweep returned a signal. Faint, distant, structured in a way that had no natural explanation. Not random noise, not stellar interference. A pattern repeating at precise intervals, originating from a point well beyond the galactic rim. Bass stared at it, then she flagged it. She wrote up the report carefully, with full sensor data attached, and sent it up the chain immediately. She did not know about the Ironhold yet. She did not know about the vote or the declassified files, or the 30 years of work Earth had been doing in the dark. But someone up the chain did. This time, the report did not stop moving.